If you still believe that the most sacred legacies of the Windsor dynasty are being cherished and protected by the very members of the family, then you are mistaken. Welcome back to the darkest corners behind the glamorous palace gates. Today, we will uncover a shocking scandal that has just been strictly covered up by the royal family. Right at Balmoral Castle, the tranquil royal garden, the place that holds the last breaths of the late Queen Elizabeth, a commercial contract worth £2.5 million, reeking of money, has just been leaked. Even more outrageously, the price to pay for this contract is 12 hectares of ancient pine forests being mercilessly leveled by giant excavators. You might wonder who has enough power and recklessness to approve an environmental destruction project right on the land of King Charles, especially when he is struggling with severely declining health. The answer will make you shudder. Because the hand that signed that cruel contract is none other than the wife who is by his sickbed day and night, Queen Camilla. The revelation of this incident has sparked a fiery confrontation right at the royal dining table. Prince William intervened with a cold and decisive attitude, while Princess Anne could not contain her flames of anger at the destruction of the legacy of her mother. All this tension revolves around a major question of whether this is simply a wrong decision or essentially a blatant scheme to amass wealth before the throne changes hands. People are questioning whether a woman who entered the royal family from the outside is truly fully committed to protecting the family legacy, or if she has always been silently digging a safe and financially abundant retreat for herself. Let us travel back in time to that fateful morning, the moment King Charles was shocked to realize the ultimate betrayal right on the beloved land of his mother. Balmoral has always been considered the final fortress of peace for the British royal family, a safe haven from the prying eyes of the public and the scrutiny of the media. But in the summer of 2026, this place is no longer a quiet sanctuary. It has become the scene of one of the most cruel betrayals. On the morning of July 12, 2026, King Charles was staying at Balmoral Castle. At the age of 77, the monarch was going through an extremely difficult period. Prolonged medical treatments had drained his strength, making his steps, heavy and lengthy meetings an overwhelming burden. To maintain the smooth operation of the royal machinery, Charles was forced to make a decision that any king would have to make when faced with physical decline, conceding a large part of internal decision-making power and personal asset management to the wife he trusted the most, Queen Camilla. He believed that she would stand in for him to uphold the family legacy while he needed time to recover. But the truth is entirely the opposite. The clock struck exactly 8:15 in the morning. As King Charles was sitting in the reading room, trying to find a rare moment of relaxation, the door suddenly burst open. The captain of the Royal Rangers, a man who had spent his entire life dedicated to guarding the forests of Balmoral, walked in. His face was pale, his trembling voice completely shattering the tranquility of the morning. He brought an urgent report that no one in the royal family ever thought could happen. 12 hectares of ancient pine forests in the area known as the Queen's Forest were being destroyed. A fleet of heavy machinery, including a series of excavators and bulldozers from Highland Developments Limited, was plowing the ground, uprooting pine trees that had stood firm for decades. The Queen's Forest is not just a green patch on the map. It is a piece of land bearing the deep personal mark of the late Queen Elizabeth. This is where she used to walk every afternoon, the place holding the most private memories of the Mountbatten Windsor family. For Charles, a man who has spent over half a century campaigning for environmental protection and anti-climate change movements, cutting down a single tree on this land was already a crime. Leveling 12 hectares of ancient forest is truly a fatal blow to both his personal beliefs and his love for his late mother. This news caused King Charles to almost collapse. Those present that morning recounted that his complexion completely changed, the fatigue of illness giving way to an uncontrollable rage. Despite the interventions of the medical team and his exhausted body after the treatments, he refused to sit and wait for a written report. He demanded that a car be prepared immediately. Charles personally drove the Land Rover, rushing straight through familiar trails to reach the scene. When the car stopped at the edge of the forest, the scene that appeared before the monarch was more devastating than any report. The roar of diesel engines tore through the quiet space of the Scottish Highlands. Giant tree trunks were broken. The ground was ruggedly plowed, exposing patches of reddish-brown soil. Charles stood there, witnessing the sacred family land being shredded by cold industrial machines. And the purpose behind this destruction is what truly sparks a wave of outrage. These machines were not working to build a conservation project or upgrade security infrastructure for the royal family. They were clearing the way to turn the Queen's Forest into a VIP glamping site, an ultra-luxurious camping area exclusively for the super-rich. This concept goes completely against all the values that Balmoral represents. Instead of protecting the pristine nature and privacy, this project aims to blatantly commercialize the royal land, turning it into a luxury resort with high-end, comfortable tents to reap massive profits from the pockets of the elite. But the biggest question is immediately raised about how such a large-scale, destructive, and commercially driven project could slip through the strict censorship barriers of the royal family. Any change on royal land must go through dozens of approval steps. King Charles immediately demanded the suspension of all construction activities and asked to see the original contract. What he discovered next revealed a sophisticated web of lies. The construction contract of Highland Developments Limited did not go through the Crown Estate as required by law. It was not reviewed by conservation councils, nor was it submitted to Parliament or the government. Instead, it took a secret detour. It was stamped and legalized by the highest level of personal authorized signature. When Charles checked the date on the document, a chilling truth ran down his spine. The contract was initialed in early June. That was exactly the time he had to be hospitalized urgently, lying on a sickbed in a coma due to the side effects of his medication. While he was fighting to regain his health, in the outside world, the power he entrusted had been weaponized to serve a contract worth millions of pounds. The shock quickly gave way to high vigilance. King Charles realized that he could not trust the current secretarial system. Such a large project could not be signed and implemented in silence without the complicity, or at least the turning of a blind eye, of senior palace staff members, those who should have protected his interests. The silence of the royal administrative apparatus for a whole month showed that they had been taken over, or threatened by a force with absolute power. Without hesitation, the king dismissed the entire on-duty assistant team. He made a call through a secure line, urgently summoning his most trusted and longtime advisors, people who were not under the influence of Camilla and had no interests tied to the new power group. His instructions were extremely brief and decisive: to freeze the project and trace the money trail. The secret investigation team of King Charles began to turn over every page of documents, extracting financial transactions and closed-door meetings that took place in June. And what they found was not simply a wrong investment decision or an impulse. It was a detailed, organized, wealth-grabbing scenario with a chilling coldness. It was perfectly designed to make the most of the power vacuum during the absence of the king, turning the priceless legacy of the family into cash flow, pouring into undisclosed accounts, preparing for a future when the throne is forced to change hands. Ladies and gentlemen, when a king feels his sovereignty threatened by outside forces, he will not hesitate to publicly retaliate. But when betrayal sprouts from his very own bed, right under his own roof, every move must be carried out in absolute silence. The secret investigation launched personally by King Charles did not go through any official law enforcement agency of the British government and was strictly forbidden from leaking to the regular royal security forces. Instead, a team of independent legal financial experts, who had been absolutely loyal since his days as the Prince of Wales, were secretly brought into the castle. They worked all night, with no paper records, no internal servers, only encrypted lines to trace a financial ghost right in the heart of the monarchy. The speed of the investigation was so rapid that it was dizzying. From the moment the roar of the excavators destroying 12 hectares of pine forest was discovered, to the morning of July 15th, the root of the massive cash flow was completely exposed. When the final report was placed on the desk of King Charles, the atmosphere in the room was not one of loud anger, but a bone-chilling silence. The figure of £2.5 million in cash was not an accounting error. Normally, any revenue from leasing or exploiting royal land must be transferred directly to the treasury of the Crown Estate for transparency and to be subject to parliamentary supervision. But this dirty money never went through that door. Instead, it made a perfect financial arc, flying over a series of legal barriers, penetrating through sophisticated shell companies to then land safely in an anonymous trust fund sitting proudly on the Isle of Man, one of the tax havens and the most notorious financial secrecy jurisdictions in the world. This trust fund carried a very catchy and highly camouflaged name, Crown Ventures Trust. On the surface, it sounded like a legitimate investment branch of the royal family. But when the investigators smashed the final legal shell, the name of the sole beneficiary appeared clearly on the paper. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it was none other than Queen Camilla. People often say that love can blur reason, and that the years standing shoulder to shoulder will create an unbreakable bond. But at the age of 78, a person who has weathered countless storms of public opinion to step to the peak of fame, perhaps Queen Camilla believes in the defensive power of a secret trust fund on the Isle of Man more than a vow of fidelity before God. She understands her fragile position better than anyone else. Her power, her title, all are anchored to the heartbeat of King Charles. As that heartbeat is growing weaker by the day due to severe health declines, she is forced to find a life preserver for herself. Let us look back at how she orchestrated this entire play. You will see this is not an impulsive act. It is a plan calculated with the precision of a strategic chess piece. Taking advantage of the worst days in early June, when King Charles had to lie on a sickbed, comatose from medication, and completely isolated from executive duties, Camilla silently made her move. As the highest authorized person during the absence of the king, she did not merely sign off on documents. She meddled in reorganizing the internal personnel system. The core real estate censorship positions, the financial security doors originally established to protect the crown assets, were gradually replaced or neutralized by cronies planted by her own hands. Thanks to this inside system, the contract with Highland Developments Limited was passed smoothly without encountering any resistance. Camilla arbitrarily signed her name, bypassing the entire national system. And the agreement she reached did not just stop at the figure of £2.5 million in grease money paid up front. The investigation team also discovered an extremely sophisticated hidden appendix clause. Her Crown Ventures Trust Fund would hold a 15% secret share in the total operating profit of that entire VIP glamping ultra-luxury resort over the next 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is absolutely not the petty greed of a pauper suddenly blinded by money. This is a strategic move, a far-sighted vision of a woman preparing for the worst-case scenario. Camilla is openly abusing her power to build herself an independent financial empire, a massive safety net for the day the throne is forced to change hands. She fully understands that, once Prince William ascends the throne, the new reign will have absolutely no room for tolerance towards her. The privileges, the abundant financial resources she is enjoying under King Charles could be ruthlessly cut off. Therefore, she is carving up the very sacred land of the family of her husband, destroying the legacy of the late Queen to feather her own nest. She wants to ensure that, even if she has to leave Buckingham Palace, she will still walk away with a massive fortune that no one can touch. but in the intoxication of power and calculations for personal gain, Queen Camilla seems to have deeply underestimated the unwritten boundaries of this family. She forgot one of the most cruel rules of survival in the royal court. Balmoral is not simply a piece of real estate privately owned by King Charles. It is the heart of the entire Windsor dynasty, a symbol of the continuity and dignity of an entire generation. And once the most core interests, the most sacred legacies, are so blatantly violated, the hidden forces within the royal family will awaken. The alpha wolves, those carrying the purest blood of the dynasty, will never sit still to watch an outsider walk in and destroy their home. The real war, ladies and gentlemen, has only just begun. The walls of royal palaces always have ears, and destructive secrets can never be locked away for too long. Despite the desperate efforts of King Charles to keep the investigation results confidential within his inner circle of advisors, the truth about the dirty contract and the excavators plowing up Balmoral quickly leaked out. That very fateful afternoon, the news bypassed the secure corridors, flying straight to the ears of the two most powerful figures who also carry the proudest blood of the Windsor dynasty, Princess Anne and Prince William. The initial shock very quickly transformed into a blazing rage. If King Charles reacted with the pain and devastation of a betrayed husband, the true heirs responded with the territorial defense instinct of those tasked with preserving the throne. Representing the steadfastness, unshakable pride, and the most core traditional values of the royal family, Princess Anne did not waste even a single moment maintaining diplomatic politeness. In her eyes, Balmoral is not just a resort property. It is the soul of the royal family, the place bearing the deepest marks of the late Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Upon learning that 12 hectares of ancient pine forest, trees nurtured by the very hands of her parents, were being bargained over on the black market to line the personal pockets of the Queen, the already fragile patience of Anne for her sister-in-law completely snapped. Without needing to go through secretaries or wait for an official appointment, Anne picked up the phone and called King Charles directly. Those who happened to be nearby had to shudder upon witnessing the wrath of the Iron Princess. She did not use comforting words for an ailing brother. Instead, Anne rained down the most harsh, icy, and direct words. She reminded Charles that he is wearing the crown of an empire, not playing the role of a foolish husband in a dead-end family drama. The legacy of their mother, the sweat and dedication of countless generations of the Mountbatten-Windsor family, cannot become a commodity for a woman from the outside to carve up at will to secure her future. Anne created a terrifying psychological pressure, backing Charles into a corner. She demanded that the king immediately sever all emotional weaknesses. This is not the time to consider how the Queen might lose face, but the time to act to protect the dignity of the monarchy. She criticized the past concessions of Charles for creating a power-hungry monster right inside his own home. The message of Anne was exceedingly clear. If Charles lacked the courage to punish the sins of his second wife, she would drag this matter into the light herself, even if it meant igniting the biggest media crisis in a decade. The fury of Anne was a fire that burned away all hypocritical disguises, forcing the king to face the naked truth about the woman sharing his bed. However, if Princess Anne used psychological pressure and traditional moral values to attack, Prince William chose a completely different path. William did not need scolding words. He resorted to the language that Queen Camilla understood best, pragmatic power and the ruthlessness of money. To William, Balmoral holds an incredibly complex and profound meaning. It is the place where he spent the most carefree summers of his childhood, but also the place where he received the tragic news of the death of his mother, Princess Diana. This place is a sanctuary of the soul, his place of refuge. But transcending all those emotional values, William is a realist, a future king forged to rule. He clearly understands the laws of the royal family. Balmoral is his lawful inheritance. One day, when the reign of his father ends, This entire Highland territory will belong to him and then be passed down to Prince George. The act of Camilla secretly signing a contract to carve up and sell the land, destroying the ancient forest to build a VIP glamping resort, is not just an act of bypassing the king. In the eyes of William, that action carries a much darker and more direct nature. Camilla is thrusting her hands straight into the pockets of the future king. She is stealing the very assets of William to build a slush fund for herself. This is a brazen act of theft, an unforgivable sacrilege against the heir to the throne. William considers this not a mistake made in chaos, but a declaration of war. And he decided to retaliate with a devastating blow. Immediately, the Prince of Wales mobilized his entire system of power. He did not rely on the legal team of Buckingham Palace, for he knew the network of Camilla had rooted itself deeply in there. William activated an independent team of financial lawyers, those dubbed the most formidable and ruthless in the legal elite of London, people who specialize in resolving billion-dollar asset disputes. By using the supreme privilege of the heir and the power of the Duchy of Cornwall, William ordered a lightning-fast legal assault. The goal was not to argue right and wrong with the construction company Highland Developments Limited, but to strangle the lifeblood of this entire conspiracy, the cash flow. The legal team of William executed unprecedented steps. They directly contacted international financial regulatory agencies, using the immense influence of the royal family to impose an immediate and comprehensive freeze on all money flows related to the Crown Ventures Trust Fund on the Isle of Man. The transfer of £2.5 million in grease money sitting in the account, along with all contracts divvying up 15% of future profits, were immediately frozen on the grounds of suspected embezzlement of Crown assets. This chess move by William was as sharp as a scalpel. He did not need to argue at the dining table, nor did he need to openly bicker with his stepmother. He simply locked tight the door to her money vault, completely severing the lifeline of the independent financial empire that Camilla was striving to build. By intervening directly in the Isle of Man, a jurisdiction famous for its strict confidentiality, William showcased a power that reaches far beyond the palace walls. The message that William sent through this action could not be more ironclad and cold. Anyone, no matter how noble a title they possess, even if they sleep in the bed of the king, if they dare to lay a dirty finger on the assets of the crown and the future of this family, they will be mercilessly crushed. He is proving to Camilla that the sovereignty may temporarily lie in the hands of King Charles, but the real power, the power of the future and survival, is in his hands. In just one afternoon, the power structure inside the royal family was completely reshaped. The excavators roaring out there may have stopped, but a much larger storm has just officially made landfall at the heart of the monarchy. The fury of Princess Anne tore apart the curtain of hypocrisy, while the financial chokehold of Prince William smashed all the safe escapes that the Queen intentionally hid. The battle has now completely transcended the limits of a typical marital conflict or a land management scandal. It has evolved into a life-and-death struggle, a zero-sum war between stepmother and stepson. Camilla made a reckless move to save herself, but she did not expect that action to awaken the killer instincts of the true heirs. Facing a prince ready to use the most ruthless tactics to protect the crown, the Queen is now trapped in the very snare she set. The game has changed, and the polite rules of the royal family have been officially discarded, giving way to a fierce purge right behind the palace gates. Exactly at 7:30 in the evening, when the antique clock located in the main hall of Balmoral Castle struck its dry chimes, an unprecedented order was issued by the monarch himself. King Charles demanded that the entire service staff retreat immediately. The diligent butlers, the inner circle security guards, and even the closest attendants were all sent out. The intricately carved oak door of the private dining room slammed shut, completely cutting off all contact with the outside world. There were no usual lavish dining rituals, no sound of silver cutlery touching porcelain plates, and absolutely no fake diplomatic smiles. The silence enveloping the room was as taut as a string stretched to its absolute limit, ready to snap at any moment. Sitting at opposite ends of the long dining table, King Charles and Queen Camilla faced each other. At this moment, Charles could no longer maintain the usual calm, tolerant demeanor of a monarch. The physical exhaustion from prolonged medical treatments was now completely overwhelmed by the blazing rage of a man who had just discovered he was stabbed in the back, and stabbed by the very woman he had traded almost his entire life, honor to protect and marry. With a decisive action full of resentment, Charles forcefully threw the file containing the commercial contract of the resort project onto the table. The sound of the stack of papers hitting the wood echoed dryly, completely shattering the silence. It was the undeniable proof of a cruel betrayal. Charles looked straight into the eyes of his wife, every word hissed through his teeth, carrying immense bitterness. He exposed the sins of the woman sitting before him. He spoke of her bone-chilling heartlessness when he was lying comatose on a sickbed, fighting death for every breath, while she was busy planning to carve up the sacred legacy of the family. He recalled the image of 12 hectares of ancient pine forests being plowed out there, the land bearing the deep mark and love of the late Queen Elizabeth. To Charles, this betrayal went far beyond financial figures. It was a trampling on the absolute trust he had given her in his most vulnerable moments. He had given her the power to maintain the stability of the family, but she used that very power to build an anonymous slush fund for herself, amassing wealth to pave the way for an escape. However, the reaction of the person opposite was what truly made the blood in the veins of the king freeze. Any other woman, when caught red-handed embezzling millions of pounds, intensely interrogated by her own husband like that, would have collapsed, burst into tears, begged for forgiveness, or at least tried to deny it. But Queen Camilla did not. Responding to the fierce wrath of the monarch was a terrifying calmness. Not a single panicked blink. Not a single disrupted breath. Not a single tear of remorse fell. Camilla sat there, her back kept perfectly straight, the expression on her face cold and sharp like the ice on the highlands. Because the woman sitting before King Charles was not a naive person taking her first steps into the Game of Thrones. She is someone who has survived decades of public storms. She was once the most hated woman in England, having endured the most ruthless media axes and immense contempt from the global public. A woman hardened by millions of curses would never be easily subdued by a confrontation at the dining table. She had prepared herself mentally for this day. From the moment she signed that dark contract, she had calculated the moment the truth would be exposed, and she had carefully kept in her hand a trump card with enough destructive power to level the entire throne. Amidst the eerie silence, Camilla slowly lifted her glass of red wine, took a small sip, with a leisurely demeanor, as if enjoying a normal dinner. The tone of her voice when she spoke was not loud. There was no harshness, but every word uttered carried the weight of a death sentence for the royal honor. She did not bother to deny the existence of the Crown Ventures Trust Fund, nor did she care to explain the 15% secret shares. Instead, she redirected the attack straight at the fatal weakness of Charles. Camilla coldly overturned the filthiest dark corners that the British royal family had spent so much effort and money to bury. First, she recalled the dark years of the 90s. She dragged into the light the underground media agreements, the dirty deals with the tabloid press that she and Charles had joined hands to execute. Those were incredibly sophisticated smear campaigns, meticulously orchestrated to crush the image of Princess Diana, weaken her voice, and step by step pave the way for the public legitimization of their relationship. Camilla held in her hands the core evidence of how the royal family had manipulated public opinion, what ruthless tactics they had used to destroy a woman loved by the whole world. If these documents were leaked, the image of Charles would completely collapse, and he would be forever pinned to the verdict of treachery in the eyes of the British people. But the second fatal card that Camilla played was what truly shattered all the resistance of the king, because it directly related to his current political life. She mentioned a medical file classified at the highest level. The truth about the actual health condition of King Charles, the detailed clinical reports, the biopsy results, the decline of internal organ functions, and the prognosis from top doctors completely contradicted the reassuring press releases that Buckingham Palace was broadcasting. England and the whole world were being deceived about the true capabilities of the reigning king. The palace was covering up the truth to prevent a constitutional crisis, the panic of the national financial markets, and the destabilization of the entire Commonwealth. The ultimatum was thrown out by Camilla. At the same time, the bottom of her wine glass lightly touched the table. Her demand was extremely clear, sharp, and left no room for bargaining. Charles must immediately order Prince William to withdraw the entire independent legal system, immediately end the blockade, targeting the trust fund on the Isle of Man, and allow the resort project to continue as if nothing had happened. If this blockade was not lifted, if her safe cash flow was cut off, then all those naked truths, from the smear campaign against Diana to the historical deception about the health of the king, would accidentally sit proudly on the front pages of a series of the most notorious tabloids by the early morning of the next day. The dinner ended in a suffocating silence. No one said another word. Camilla calmly stood up, left the room, leaving King Charles sitting silently on his chair of power. He felt an ultimate helplessness gnawing at his soul. The threat from Camilla had hit his most fatal weakness. She never made empty threats. She had enough network and recklessness to sink everything. His crumbling and exhausted body could not bear another global-scale media crisis. The monarchy, already fragile under his era, would not be able to withstand this destructive shock. The old king was alone in his own palace, facing a dead end. He stood before the most cruel and bitter choice of his life: to accept swallowing the lump, turn a blind eye, to let the traitor escape with the money to preserve the last bit of honor for the dynasty, or resolutely punish the greed and personally ignite the most shocking media explosion of the century. Right that night, King Charles made a brutal decision. He did not act as a husband trying to hold on to family affection, but he struck with the supreme authority of a monarch. By using his highest privilege, Charles immediately issued an order to suspend the entire leveling project in the ancient forest, while banning Queen Camilla from setting foot in the Balmoral Castle area for the rest of the summer. However, this war has not yet come to an end. The fate of the £2.5 million sitting in the trust fund is currently still an extremely dangerous gray area, continuing to be the center of a fierce legal tug-of-war between the formidable legal team of Prince William and the underground financial network of the Queen. Ladies and gentlemen, the shocking event this past July completely tore apart the glamorous velvet curtain covering the palace. It proved to the whole world that, behind the radiant smiles and friendly waves to the public on the balcony, the British royal family is truly fracturing to its core. When the shadow of death begins to linger around the declining health of the king, that is also when greed, ruthlessness, and schemes to amass wealth are pushed to their peak. Let us know how you evaluate the ruthless but absolutely necessary interception by Prince William. We wonder if Queen Camilla will obediently accept her retreat, or if she is silently waiting for the opportunity to unleash her next fatal revenge strike. Please leave your views right in the comments section below. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any of the latest developments in this fierce game of power. See you again in the next hidden corners of the British royal family.